Yes, it is July, which means football is right around the corner, which means redraft as well as best ball is going to take over for the next few weeks. And if you've been drafting a lot of teams, it's time to kind of consider how to adapt to redraft and how to take the best possible approach to your leagues this year. Andrew, as someone who ranked top five in the Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings for 2024 drafts, what stands out the most to you when it comes to adapting for 2025 when you've been drafting a lot of best ball drafts and then looking at redraft?
Well, I know for me, I have to take some time off of drafting best ball teams. I need to kind of reset the brain into redraft mode, into I actually have to push the start button on these certain players. So, as great as it sounds to say, oh man, this wide receiver is going to have so many spike week, it's going to be great. I never have to project when to start them. Not the case in redraft. You have to be able to click the button and think, oh my God, I have to put Keon Coleman in my starting lineup. Am I going to feel good about that in week one? Maybe not. So I think that's one of the big things. And I think with best ball, it's obvious that it sets your lineup automatically. But one of the things that's different is there's no access to the waiver wire. And we know how integral the waiver wire, playing the waiver wire during your redraft league, how important that is to building a winning team. And I think that you made it a great point in the outline, Tom, where you talked about the later rounds in best ball drafts, where you're getting to 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, even 20 rounds. You're basically trying to draft the waiver wire players before they become available on the waiver wire, before they become
Yeah.
targets in redraft leagues.
Yeah, massively so, because like you spin back to a couple of years ago, Karen Williams, Puka Nakua were guys who, in the vast majority of redraft leagues, if you're talking about 15 rounds, potentially were undrafted, and they were the guys that you could unload for, and you felt confident paying massive amounts for. But we don't have that in best ball. So I think in best ball, this is the time of year where we want to start shaping our takes. We've had the off season, we've had OTAs, we've had mini camps, we've had so many pieces of information that start to give us an advantage. And if you've been drafting, then you know what the pockets in the draft are. Like currently, there's this round 8 to around sort of round 12 range where there's so many quarterbacks, there's so many tight ends. And I kind of strongly believe that for best ball, if you can hit on the best quarterback and the best tight end in that range, is probably going to lead to you being quite profitable. But in redraft every year, we see it like, as you say, you need a break. You need to like cleanse the mind and prepare yourself for redraft because AD is so different. And nothing is as different to mock drafts or anything like that as your home league is. Like my home league, it's a keeper league, so that always throws things a little bit. But like you can go from drafting on a site like Underdog, which is quite wide receiver heavy, to going and looking at redraft ADPs, and rather than being 5 running backs in the first round, you might be seeing 6, 7. We're seeing guys like Christian McCaffrey now firmly in the first round, but then Ashton Genty, Derrick Henry, Devon Achane kind of all around that turn. Does your approach of a running back position in general switch when you're drafting in redraft compared to best ball?
I think it does. I think it always has to change a little bit. And I think that JJ Zachariason brought up a good point on his best ball show where he talks about how what you can take from best ball ADP that you can apply to redraft is the way that the players are ranked in positions, right? So you're taking the running back ranking. So those maybe not won't change as much. Maybe you get a little bit difference when it comes to rookie players, but for the most part, you're going to see the veteran running backs kind of go in the same order, but it's where they are drafted overall that changes from best ball to redraft because of, again, Underdog is very wide receiver heavy. You're not going to see that in your redraft home leagues. You're going to see more running backs taken. So just considering that. And I think that that's why we talk about using the mock draft simulator, especially when you can sync it to your specific league, especially when you can use draft intel, where it can tell you exactly how often running backs do go based on your historical trends and data for each specific manager in that league. They say that Joe from accounting always takes a running back in round 3. So when it happens, you're like, I was ready for this. I knew this was going to happen, and you can adjust on the fly accordingly and even be prepared for that to happen. So that's kind of my approach with it. I think that you can definitely get an opportunity to get better receivers later on. So yes, maybe you feel a little, and that's part of the reason why I talked about earlier, where you have to get out of the best ball mindset. Because if I think, oh, I'll just get all these receivers, there are going to be so many late receivers that I like. And I'm like, these guys are usually never here. So I wish I had taken running back a little bit earlier and invested more draft capital earlier on at running back versus waiting for a receiver because I didn't really have to.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point because I know your typical lean is towards a hero RB build in best ball. Mine over the last 2 years, it's been hero RB and zero RB, and I'm very comfortable pushing the boundaries of zero RB and really testing just how far you can push it as long as I've got that elite quarterback and elite tight end. But in redraft leagues, the running backs get pushed up so quickly that you might be thinking, right, well, I'm going to hit on this tier where there's guys like DeAndre Swift, James Conner, and I'm going to be okay. But before you know it, particularly if you're at a turn in redraft leagues, it can get wiped out and it can be very difficult to recover from that because then you're immediately in a situation where you are forced to make aggressive swings on waivers. Now, look, the year that Puka Nakua and Kyron Williams were waiver wire heroes, or even Jamal Williams the year before that, that's fine. That can work out. Last year, I'm not sure if there were many successful waiver wire guys. Like Isaiah Likely was the guy that everybody was taking the huge swing on last year. After that tight end one performance where he had like what was it, like over 25 points against the Chiefs in week one. And then he ended up being very not good, let's just say, for fantasy football, particularly redraft leagues for the vast majority of the season till late on. So do you have particular positions where you're willing to be more aggressive in redraft compared to your approach to them in best ball?
I think that's a really great question. I think that I do prefer elite tight end a little bit more in the best ball format than necessarily redraft because I think that having access to the waiver wire, we see that a lot of early round tight ends, especially last year, they busted at a really high rate, and late round was definitely the way to go. And we see late round tight ends produce every single year. We see a guy that drastically outproduces his ADP. If I'm betting on one guy to do that this year, it's Tucker Kraft for me. Like that's the guy that I'm circling as my kind of late to the middle round tight end to draft, especially in redraft formats and in best ball. So I think that's one thing I'll change a little bit. I think that the archetype of player is also important to recognize, talking about how you feel about clicking a player. Like, does this guy get volume? Right? You can't bank on efficiency as much, I would say, just because you need to have that projectable volume that you feel confident putting a player into your lineup every single week. Whereas, again, when it's best ball and it's automatically scoring, you're less dependent on, oh, he has to get the targets this week. If he doesn't get the targets
Yeah.
this week, it's okay. Someone else can pick up the slack.
So does that affect kind of your approach to rookies? Because like in most best ball drafts, I'm looking at and it's like, right, I want probably 3 to 4 rookies minimum, particularly in a year where we've got a good class, because rookies typically can be some of the most undervalued assets in fantasy. Like you look back, even Jamar Chase when he came out was what, like round 4. Now, obviously Marvin Harrison last year was the polar opposite and was overvalued. But we've had plenty of other guys that have been massively big wins compared to what their ADP has been. Do you feel better saying, I'm only going to take the rookie I have supreme confidence in earlier on in drafts, and then later on I'll just play the waivers? Or do you see it kind of more as a situation where it's like you're just leaning on your gut instincts about those players?
I think it's better to take the swings on the rookies that just are coming at a little bit more of a discount. And even that's comparing it to the other rookies in their specific draft class. Because I think that sometimes gets lost in the rookie analysis, where the reason why rookies have been so good in fantasy football is because they're usually cheaper. It's really been the last couple of years where their prices started to increase. And now we're getting more rookies that I would say bust because the expectations coming in are so high. Now, Marvin Harrison, if he had been going last year at the same range as Malik Neighbors, he still would have been disappointing, but not to the
Yeah.
extent that he was, as a basically a round 1-2 fringe pick. So that's something to keep in mind, that, kind of ask yourself, most rookies have to face some type of hurdle as year one players. I know that someone that I've been kind of warming on it as I think about is a guy like Dylan Sampson, where, he's kind of buried because there's another really talented rookie on the same team. The Browns drafted 2 rookie running backs. But part of me is always thinking, man, any veteran has to just be looking over their shoulder because a rookie got drafted in this class. I mean, I just want as much exposure to this rookie running back class as possible. And that's not going unnoticed by the market. A lot of these rookies are steamed up. But when there's 2 rookies in the same backfield, where the market has decided, well, no, it's Quinjon Judkins. Like, he is the guy because he got drafted first. And maybe that's the case. But Dylan Sampson was a really talented player in his own right. And it's also the Browns, right? If this is the worst offense in the NFL, can Quinshon Judkins hurt me if I don't draft him and this Browns offense is terrible? So those are things I'm looking for. And I think even of the top rookie running backs, I like Caleb Johnson a lot too. He goes a lot later than some of the other guys because he was drafted in the 3rd round. But I think the Steelers, if they had a 2nd round pick, they probably would have taken Caleb Johnson, but they didn't have one, and they just got lucky that he fell to him. So those are the things that I kind of been thinking about when it comes to like floor and versus ceiling with the rookies.
Yeah, and that's like such a good point because it's like floor feels like something much more viable in redraft league than ceiling. Like so, like contrast this with the DraftKings Millie Maker final. Last year there was 1,021 teams in the final. The winning team had to hit on not just the players who carry you there, which last year was Brian Thomas, like Justin Jefferson, Monra St. Brown were all some of the wide receivers who carried players there. Jared Goff, who was 40% rostered, was one of those players. But then when you're in the final, you have to be able to have enough of a differential. And the roster that won it all last year, taking home like $2 million or $1.5 million, whatever it was, they had only 3 players on their roster who were more than 10% owned in that final. I think Bucky Irving was one of them, Brian Thomas the other, and then Jared Goff. So in best ball, we're always trying to say, well, let's look for ceiling and whether that comes through stacks, whether that comes from bringbacks. But in redraft, there is a lot to be said for floor. Now, obviously, like if your league rewards most points scored, or if there's some plays like on FFPC redraft where week 6 you have an all play format where every team in the league isn't playing a direct head to head. You are just, it's the 6 teams who scored most points that week get the win, the 6 teams who don't get the loss. So understanding that is definitely there, but I think you can survive a lot easier in redraft and just make the playoffs and just simply bet on having the right players at the right time. And I think so much of that kind of comes back to conviction, comes back to rankings, comes back to all the little things that we preach here over at Fantasy Pros. But one point which we should probably touch on is bye week strategy. Like in best ball, I don't really consider bye week strategy too much. Like obviously, if you're going with a double tight end build or a 2 QB build, having them both on the same bye week could be pretty catastrophic, particularly on like a total points format like drafters, where if you end up taking a 0 that week, it is really going to harm you. But do you have a particular strategy that you tend to go for with redraft? The one strategy I play every year is try to find a kicker with a really late bye week so I can just set it and forget it because I just don't want to deal with kickers. But Graham, commissioner of our league, does a great job. Shout out Graham, but please, let's get rid of kickers. Let's make this the year.
Tom's doing the lazy man's guide to kickers. Just take the guy with the latest bye week. That's how you do it. Yeah, some people say it's lazy, but you just think it's smart. So if it works out, I can't push against it. I think for me,
I mean, sorry, just to be, if there was any money involved in the home league, then maybe I'd play it differently. But otherwise, it's just get out of my life, kickers.
I just look for kickers that play in domes. Like that's basically the amount of kicker. And Arizona Cardinals have 13 games indoors this season, which is the most of any NFL team. So keep that in mind. Who is the Cardinals kicker?
Arizona Cardinals kicker.
Is it Zane Gonzalez? I cannot remember.
Was it Matt Prater for a while?
He was the guy that was there for a long time. I don't know if he's there anymore. Remember Zane Gonzalez was there for a cup of coffee at some point. I don't know who the kicker is right now, but
it's Matt Prater.
Oh, it is
Matt Prater and Chad Ryland, who was the Patriots draft pick a couple of years ago, who I'm sure you remembered. But yeah, sign me up to Matt Prater. Matt Prater's still got a good leg. We are all aboard the Prater Craters for 2025.
The Prater Craters. Oh man, how is that the first time I've ever heard that? And I feel like I've drafted Matt Prater on a lot of my fantasy teams throughout the years. Wow, that is legendary. Tom, you just can continue out to yourself. So bye week strategy for me. So again, you don't have waivers in the best ball format, so you do have to fill these bye weeks in some way, some form. I kind of wanted to pick your brain though, Tom, about when you draft players on the same bye weeks at the quarterback position, at the tight end position, in a way to get unique. I thought that I know that's a conversation that people have brought up in terms of, well, a lot of people aren't doing it because, okay, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because you are going to take a 0 for that particular week. But now you're getting a combination of players. Now, I haven't looked and seen if there are teams that play in week 17 that also have the same bye week. So I'm not sure if that would be kind of the ultimate correlation play, but what were you thinking?
Well, I was just going to say, like Trey McBride, Brock Bowers is one that I know a lot of people are starting in the Scott Fishbowl drafts right now, and the scoring in Scott Fishbowl is always quite funky. It always benefits tight ends quite a lot. And I've seen people talking about wanting the double dip on the tight ends, and it's also something which I'm doing a lot of FFPC Superflex drafts at the minute. FFPC reward tight ends with the tight end premium. And there's times where you're at the back end of round one, picking like 9th, 10th, where Brock Bowers falls to you, and you're like, if this comes back around, can I punt quarterback and just go double elite tight end, which is a strategy which has worked a little bit on FFPC over the years. But the problem is they have the same bye week. So is it worth saddling up and saying, I can get a huge amount of points from these guys week to week, be quite unique, because a lot of people will be avoiding this, and then just stick at 2, or are you going to have to twist and go at 3? So yeah, my general feeling is I'm a little bit scared of doing it, and scared money don't make no money. So I will mix it in occasionally, but it's not comfortable. Are you with me, or do you kind of stray against that?
I think that I probably would stray against. I think that when you're max entering a lot of these teams, if you're putting 150 lineups into some of these bigger tournaments, I think that there's a case to be made to, hey, we got to get wild at some points. Like we got to do some weird things just to kind of get unique. But I would say if you're more of a normal best ball draft, or you're looking more at 25 to 50 teams, I don't think that that's necessary to draft players on purpose that have the same bye week. Now, I'm sure that people have done it by accident, or in some of these pre-draft best ball leagues where you didn't know when the bye weeks would happen. So naturally you have some uniqueness in those types of formats. So maybe that's kind of, hey, I got plenty of exposure to quarterbacks with the same bye weeks already. I don't need to overindulge, like you alluded to, where you're taking a 0 on purpose. So I think I agree with you. I think that it's probably just, hey, it doesn't take that much effort to just make sure your quarterbacks and your tight ends don't have the same bye weeks. But besides that, I'm not necessarily worried about, oh, well, I have too many receivers or running backs with the same bye week. As long as you have enough guys, I think in the aggregate, I think that you'll be okay. And, some of your players are going to get hurt anyway. So even if you think that you're okay for 1 week, injuries might happen, and you're going to end up taking some 0s anyway.
Yeah, and in redraft, like I'm completely fine with that.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that you can just, if people are fading somebody because of a bye week or anything like that, then it's just a chance for you to be able to scoop it up. But look, no draft tonight. We are just chatting all things strategy. But next week, we'll be back in the best ball streets, and each and every Monday, all the way through until the season starts. Myself, Tom Strachan, Andrew Erickson, who you, of course, know. We're just going to try and help you dominate your best ball drafts all summer long. We'll talk strategies, stacks, sleepers, so much more. We'll talk about the many great articles in the Fantasy Pros Best Ball Kit, and we'll be in those drafts with yourself. If you are over here on Twitch, twitch.tv/Fantasy Pros, you will be able to see when we jump into those drafts. You will be able to draft alongside us. We will happily give you feedback on your drafts, as well as listening to any criticism you've got about ours, because occasionally we've been known to click the wrong button or pull a player up way above ADP. But that's all part of the fun and game, and why it's advantageous for you to come and draft against us. So yes, each and every Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern, over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Fantasy Pros. Get involved as we try and make this the best ball summer ever. Andrew, let's talk about another aspect of best ball that felt like this was a good time in the offseason to get to. All about spreading exposures out. So look, your risk tolerance plays a big part in how you want to build a best ball portfolio. Now, if you're just drafting 10, 15 teams, then by all means, go pick the guys that you want, unless this is like, 10K buy-ins or something like that. But if you are just here to have a bit of fun, you just enjoy low stakes drafting perhaps, then get the guys you want. Have the conviction, because ultimately this is your money. You're the person who should feel best about how you spend it, for at least now. But if you were building a portfolio of teams, I mean, last year I was close to 400. It can definitely pay off to take a varied sort of portfolio, deciding which rounds you want to be heavy on players. And my kind of rule of thumb is a bit of a sliding scale. Round 1 to 3, I don't really want to be much above 15% on a player. round 4 to 6, that kind of increases up to 20%, round 7 to 10, 25%, and then round 11 to 14, 30%, and then the last 5, 6 rounds, 35%. There's never really been a point where I've stopped drafting because I've hit these, but that's just kind of like a rough guideline. Like I like to keep an eye on my portfolio of players and say, right, you've gone above where you feel confident normally. Is it time to stop drafting that player? Is it time to double down and really say that this is the year, this is the player? And the reason why it's kind of beneficial to do this is just we see so many late breakouts from guys. Last year, 2 years in a row, we've kind of seen it at the tight end in 2023. Sam Laporta, last year, Johnny Smith, Zach Ertz. You go back to the Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua year, and no matter how good any of us are at analysis, we do have to kind of be humble and say there's a lot that goes on in fantasy football that we just can't predict, that we don't know where it's coming from, like the Zay Jones breakout year, the Jamal Williams breakout year, these players who haven't necessarily shown it to us. So having spread out your exposure can be an easier way of maybe hitting on these players. Andrew, thinking about specifically round 1, what's like the lowest and the highest that you'd be kind of willing to go on players based on this year's ADP?
So I'm glad that you brought this up because I was thinking about when it comes to fading players in best ball. And so I'm someone that doesn't draft nearly as many teams as you do. So I've drafted more teams this year with fast draft just because it's really easy. It's again, they're really fast drafts. So it's really easy for me to draft a lot of teams, especially with the turbo mode. But in terms of DraftKings, underdog, drafters, these types of drafts, I'm probably more in the 50 range overall. So that does give me some.
What I've found helped is if you draft 5 teams at once, that tends to speed things up and you get more drafts up.
That is true. So again, more tips from Tom, just exactly how to win at life is doing this. So for me, I feel like I can be a little bit more. I guess the word would say it would be aggressive in terms of having. I can fade guys a little bit harder. I can be exposed to guys a little bit harder when it comes to drafting just less teams. Like you said at the beginning, get your guys that you want on your teams. So I'll peel back a little bit with exposures to players specifically on fast draft when it's guys I have ranked back to back. Obviously, I'm taking the guy I have ranked higher and more often than the guy I have ranked below him. But when I look at the exposures and I see one guy's up at 50% and one guy's at 10%, I think, okay, I don't need to keep drafting this particular player. Prime example would probably be some of the Jets players. So Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So they go in round 3. I probably have an unhealthy amount of Garrett Wilson. And now I'm ready. Okay, I've got my fun with Garrett Wilson. I've made the bet that Justin Fields, he can be DJ Moore in this offense. And now I'm ready to draft Breece Hall. Like that's who I want if I'm going to be drafting a Jets player. And Tom is laughing at me because clearly drafting Jets players is just it's not going to work this year. But that's besides the point. So
also just Seth put in our private chat. Producer Seth put tips from Tom sounds like a good segment for the show. Maybe we will have to run that back. But yes, sorry. We talked about it last year when the Jets players were in round 1, like drafting 2 Jets players highly. What could possibly go wrong? And yeah,
and now it's round 3. At least it's round 3 this time and not round 1. But I would say, yeah, I'm more prompt to probably fade some guys entirely. Like Saquon Barkley for me, again, I've talked about the touches, the workload he's coming off of. He's a top 5 pick. And I'm not drafting enough teams where I feel, I just have to draft at least a couple Saquon teams just in case he does stay healthy and he completely goes on another sun run, because that's still in his range of outcomes. Again, he could stay healthy the entire year. I could be wrong. He could be Ezekiel Elliott when he was the first guy to return a top 5 finish after leaving the NFL in touches. So it's not impossible, but when I'm only drafting 50 teams, okay, I can take a fade on Saquon Barkley. And the other guy that I'm not super high on the round 1 is Amon-Ra St. Brown, where I just think that there's a lot of other guys. I like the other lines priced players more than St. Brown. And he had this weird offseason surgery that we just kind of heard about, and we didn't really get that many details about it. And he missed kind of all of the OTAs with the new offense. John Morton comes in. The first thing he says is, Jameson Williams, breakout season. I just like that means a lot to me that the guy coming in, again, he was with the Lions in 2022, but was with Denver the last 2 seasons, and then immediately steps in and just says, hey, yeah, Jameson Williams breakout season. That just, I don't know. That means a lot to me. So those are 2 guys in round 1, for an example, that I would be comfortable not clicking the button on basically ever. But would I do that if I was drafting 150 teams? Probably not.
Yeah, like round one in particular, this year feels like such a strong year. There's very few guys that I want to take any kind of conviction on. Saquon's not somebody that I'm necessarily overly high on, but I think it's like when you're drafting multiple hundreds of teams, there will be occasions where it's like you can get Saquon Barkley at pick 5, pick 6, and it's like, okay, well, maybe that gives me access to a slightly different build. So I'm not going to pass him up now, but I'm not necessarily going to take him at ADP either. My general rule of thumb in round one is if I can kind of try and keep things fairly smooth, like if all players could be above 5%, which isn't that difficult to make happen. I mean, we're expecting average exposure base rate is 8.3% if you took each one of 12 players, 12 times 8.3, basically 100. So, yeah, like the thing to be mindful of in round one is how much a bad year from a round one talent can absolutely crucify your season. So last year, Christian McCaffrey, the 101 in many drafts, had a 4% advance rate, which was the lowest for any player in Best Ball Mania. On the DraftKings Millie Maker finalist team out of 1,021 teams, he was on 0.3% of them. Like he was an absolute lineup killer. And it can really harm you, which is why I think it's worth being mindful and not going, okay, I'm going to take 30% Jameer Gibbs. I'm going to take 30% Nico Collins. Even if you believe that those guys are the guys who can be the difference maker. I mean, look, last year, Jamar Chase was on 45% of teams that made the BBM finals. He was on a healthy amount of DraftKings finalists as well. So if you hit on that right, then don't get me wrong, you could make a good amount of money, but it's weighing that against saying, if that guy tears his ACL in week one or even before the season starts, how much money have I just put down? And it can be quite difficult. And I think you really have to balance how miserable you want to feel throughout the entire fantasy football season. Whereas later in drafts, it's so much easier to carry zeros. So the DraftKings Millie Maker team last year, we talked about this a few weeks ago, but they had Trey McBride, who went off in the final week of the season. I believe finally scored a touchdown. And he also had Theo Johnson and Ben Sinnott on his team. Now, Theo Johnson got injured in week 13, didn't have more than 8 points in any game all season, I don't think. And then Ben Sinnott, I think, combined to score about 9 points across the whole year. Like, those guys weren't giving you anything, but that team invested really minimal amounts of draft capital in them, and they hit on Trey McBride. You go to the Best Ball Mania winner last year, they got zilch from Jermaine Burton. They had a Bengals mega stack with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase that won everything for them, and they got absolutely nothing out of Jermaine Burton all year. You can carry those kind of late round players if you hit on your top end talents, and obviously if you can hit on the back end talents as well. That's the ideal scenario where that's guys like Jordan Love, Geno Smith, Jamal Williams, Kyron Puka, the list goes on of people over the years. Like, Andrew, are there any particular guys this year that you're getting into that back quarter of drafts and you're willing to make quite a high level bet on them being excellent this year?
Well, I just wrapped up or just submitted my late round best ball strategy piece to the best ball draft kit. So you think that this would be top of mind for me, but I have to quickly look and see some of the guys that I listed off here. So I just pulled it up right now. So I did want to say, although he's not really going super, super late, I mean, Rashod Bateman still is, I think that he's a round 12, round 13 type of guy. He's a player to me, and I know you were asking about late round guys, but I think we gotta wax some poetic on Rashod Bateman because
okay, if you must.
So Bateman, to me, I think that he's such a great best ball pick because right now the opportunity is not really there for him. We're projecting him okay. He plays in a run-heavy offense, but what if there's an opportunity that changes? Because right now we're drafting a lot of these teams like this opportunities and situations aren't going to change dramatically. All the depth charts are set. We know for the most part who's number one wide receiver, who's the number two receiver, who's the number one tight end. So we'll get more of this information as training camp starts, as injuries start to pile up, and as the season progresses. But once the season starts, we can't draft any more best ball teams. Like it's over. So I want to lock and load on guys that maybe they don't have the opportunity right now, but if Rashod Bateman got an expanded role in the Ravens offense, I think that he would be great. I really think that he could be effective again, if he doesn't get hurt, but he's coming off a season where he finally stayed healthy. He's not rehabbing another new injury this offseason. So he's dialed in. The Ravens were turning down trade offers for Rashod Bateman because they know he's a good wide receiver. He's a former first-round pick. And I think that looking at the Ravens offense, last year, this offense was relatively healthy. One of the healthiest offense in the NFL last season. So if Zay Flowers misses time, if Mark Andrews gets banged up again, yes, Isaiah Likely I think is really exciting. But what if Bateman is the guy that takes on a larger role? We saw when Zay Flowers missed some time at the end of last year. Bateman really stepped up. He had over 1,000 air yards last year. He also scored a boatload of touchdowns. So maybe that's not replicable. But when you have Lamar Jackson as your quarterback, I think that you have a high ceiling inherently. And Rashod Bateman, to me, in round 12, I think that he's way too talented to be going that late. And he's one guy that I'm always circling, regardless of my builds, honestly, because of where he wins, especially because he wins down in the field and he sees targets in the red zone. So maybe he doesn't get a boatload of targets. Maybe he's not getting 10 targets per week, but when he does get a target, he scores a touchdown. Oh, he catches a 40-yard touchdown, things like that.
They're high value, aren't they? And like he had a higher catch rate than Zay Flowers, despite his average depth of target being 4.1 yards deeper. Really shone towards the end of the season. So I love that call. I'll give you one in kind of a similar-ish range, but Tyler Algier is one of the easiest clicks for me in every single draft. I just find all the arguments that we build for Bijan Robinson about why he can be the 101 overall, and I'm firmly in that camp. Look, it's naive to say that Bijan couldn't get injured. And if Bijan gets injured, then we've seen it from Tyler Algier before. Now, I'm not saying he can be the RB1 overall, but I think he can be a top 12 running back for the rest of the season from any point. He's excellent. He's a very good pass catcher. He finished top 10 in juke rate last year, top 10 in missed tackles forced. Like, it's a guy who has shown us it. So, okay, Andrew, digging a little bit deeper than that, anybody towards the very ends of the rounds who you keep clicking?
Okay, so this is a guy that I think he could be total zero, right? So we're talking about you gotta avoid the zeros.
I'm excited.
But I think the talent is still there in some shape or form. Deontay Johnson. That's the guy.
I love that you said Deontay Johnson. Yes. I was on somebody's show drafting with them last week, and we got to round 20, and I said, I interest you in Deontay Johnson. There was a good little puff piece from Mary Kay Cabot of the Browns beat report last week talking about how he had been in line to be, on the field in wide receiver 2 sets. And the guy I was drafting with almost threw up. But Andrew, carry on.
Well, when you look at chemistry with Browns quarterbacks, right? Jerry Jeudy doesn't have much chemistry with any of the current Browns quarterback. He wasn't there. Joe Flacco, they didn't overlap. Joe Flacco has chemistry with Cedric Tillman. Kenny Pickett, who did he play quarterback with at Pittsburgh with the Pittsburgh Steelers? Deontay Johnson. So is this a scenario? Yeah. So is this a scenario where I think that we're probably going to see 3 or 4 quarterbacks play for the Browns? I know they have 3 or 4 quarterbacks on the roster, but it could be Flacco, and then they go to Pickett, and then they go to one of the rookies, and we don't know what the rookies are going to do. So last year, if I told you if I told you Jerry Jeudy or Deontay Johnson, who's better? Right. You'd probably be like, maybe it's a toss-up. I mean, at that point, Deontay Johnson had better seasons overall than Jerry Jeudy.
Probably would have gone Deontay Johnson, yeah.
So, yes, Deontay Johnson obviously carries so much baggage in terms of where he is mentally. He was on 4 different teams last year. I don't even remember. I lost track. And clearly the Steelers have a track record of moving on from Steelers receivers before they kind of go off the deep end. So, yes, he could be a total 0-0 burger as a 20th round pick. But, I mean, if he's a starter in 3 receiver sets on the Browns, who could be one of the pass happiest offenses in the NFL, and he's talented. Like, he is a good wide receiver when he is playing an offense that he cares about. So in the 20th round, I mean, are you going to take Deontay Johnson or players that we don't even know if they're going to have roles in their offenses? Like some of these rookie receivers in a rookie class that's really not that talented. So for me, Deontay Johnson just really pops up as, are we just like totally overthinking this of a player that we know is really talented, that commands targets at a really high level, and basically last year was a wash because Carolina was trying to offer him because of the contract, and then he just couldn't really find his footing with a new team. I mean, he would be the first receiver to kind of not hit when getting traded in season. Like, that's hard for some guys. And Amari Cooper, he's not even on a team anymore, right? He's still a free agent after getting traded. So yeah, he could be a nothing burger, but I mean, the minute that they get reports he's starting and, Kenny Pickett and Deontay Johnson are flashing their chemistry from Pittsburgh, well, he's not going to be in the 20th round anymore.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you guys want to find out where we're ranking these guys, you can head over to fantasypros.com/best ball. The 2025 best ball draft kit is absolutely live right now. You're not just getting strategy content stuff, you are also getting the rankings, including Andrew Erickson, who finished as the 5th best ranking maestro last year in the overall draft kit. But there's stuff all about how to correctly apply hero RB, zero RB, whether you can use robust RB, how to attack the running back dead zone, and so much more. Our best ball draft kit is everything you need to draft smart and win big in best ball this season. Andrew, we are going to hit on just a couple of listener questions before we get out of here. And we've kind of covered a little bit about this already, but Tim in the Discord asked, can you go through your thought process in different factors that go into your picks? How maybe those factors change in the first third to the middle third to the last third of the draft? Are you focused on stacking? Are you focusing on week 17 matchups, just simply looking for ADP value? So for me, and Andrew, I'll pop that into the chat just in case you want to review that whilst kind of break this down. For me, ADP is the first thing that comes into a lot of it, because if I have a chance to grab somebody who's falling way past ADP, that's a tried and tested benefit to your team. Mike Leone of Established Run has done a lot of great work about how scooping up ADP value generally tends to be a winning formula. I mean, just look at the NFL draft. The teams who trade back tend to net positive over the years. So I want to scoop ADP value where I can, because that might allow me to push somebody else and then get them at a later value. Then it comes down to, how does this pick complement the players that I've already drafted? Like, am I making this pick just because I like that player, or does that give me alternating bye weeks? Does that give me a little correlation? And then as we get towards the last kind of third of the draft, that's where I'm just looking to enhance that correlation, whether it's through stacks, whether it's through guaranteed touches at points in the season where I need them. Andrew, anything that I've not covered there that you would add to that conversation?
I think that I wouldn't add anything. I think that's a great kind of descriptor of the mindset that you're kind of going through. And I know that I probably overthink things when I'm in some of these slow drafts too, where I'm looking probably more and more in depth at certain turns about stacking and, what does this, I guess a question, and I'm curious, Tom, if you ask yourself this too. And I think that, yes, scooping up ADP value is a really easy way, hey, this is how you build a good team, like scoop up the values that fall to you. But asking myself in the draft room at the time of the picks is, what's the best pick that this team needs right now? Because in a vacuum, it's easy to talk, and that's how we have to talk about these players a lot of time, because we're not always talking about them in accordance with a team. Now it's a little different on streams when we do actually talk about it in relation to the team that we're actually selecting, but because different teams need different things. And sometimes, as painful as it can be, sometimes you have to forego an ADP value because it just doesn't fit what you're trying to do. It's going to kind of get you off of the script that you're writing for your team, because it's just, hey, like, you drafted a lot of these teams. This isn't the time to take on a scooping Joe Burrow or a Joe Burrow that's falling. You have no Bengals receivers. Like, you're not going to do this. So, like, you got to look the other way. Someone else is going to get a great value. Tip the cap to them. But for your team, you don't need to pick Joe Burrow 2 rounds after ADP because you already drafted Jalen Hurts or something along those lines.
No, this is a brilliant point, and it's something that really matters. It's complementary drafting, saying how does this work for the team, and that matters so much. One conversation that's been a bit of a hot topic on Twitter recently has been zero RB, after it kind of was fantastic in 2023, won people millions of dollars playing best ball. And then last year, when everybody was leaning into zero RB, it was catastrophic. It had like an 8% advance rate, which is like half as good as you'd expect just to be average. So people are talking about whether it's viable, whether the current landscape allows you to do it. But the one thing that people were kind of getting wrong last year with zero RB were people were prioritizing just hammering the wide receiver position, because there were so many wide receivers being pushed up the board that they didn't want to fall behind. Now you go back and look at the kind of original thought process behind Zero RB that Sean Siegel wrote in 2013. And Sean pointed out back then that it's not just prioritizing wide receiver, it's prioritizing archetype saying, I would like to get the elite tight end. I would like to get a quarterback with massive upside so that I build this overall monster of a team. And then when you do start taking shots on running back, it's not just saying, right, I just need running back. I just need running back. It's also looking for the late season breakouts. So if you're building a team that way, it's understanding what you're getting. And it's if you're playing the polar opposite of that and going with a robust RB team, is there any sense in taking just a volume monster in the kind of like round 11, round 12 range, even round 10? Like if you've gone out and drafted, I don't know, say Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, and then fourth round Kenneth Walker, does adding Javonte Williams add anything whatsoever to your team? No, you're much better taking the upside swing on Jaden Blue and say, like, now I'm not necessarily somebody who's drafting a lot of Jaden Blue, but at least Jaden Blue would potentially give you something of the unknown, something that could hit in a big way. And if he fails, it's okay because you need those early round running backs to really pay off in a massive way anyway. So it's kind of looking at that combination. So yeah, I think that's really smart. We got one more question from Mano Mitch, again from the Discord. If you've got questions about anything to do with best ball, drop them in the Discord, and myself and Andrew, we will try and get to as many as possible, or you can always find us on Twitter. But Mitch asks, how many quarterbacks are you trying to get in Superflex drafts in the first 5 rounds to feel good?
I love this question because nobody feels good when you wait a quarterback in Superflex drafts because you're sweating bullets because you get nervous because if you fall too behind or you fly too close to the sun with these Superflex quarterbacks, you can get cooked. And then you have a team that potentially can't compete and you're just paying the rake. And that's not fun. That being said, there's also a strategic element to waiting correctly and then hitting on that second quarterback a little bit later on. So to answer the question, it would be 2 quarterbacks. Like if you get 2 within 5 for the first 5 rounds, you're feeling good. I think that anyone that drafts 2 quarterbacks kind of start things out, you're going to feel good about your team. You're going to feel better. You don't feel like, oh, I'm behind the 8 ball. That being said, you can build better teams. I think if you at least try to wait a little bit, because you can just get so much value, the skill position players, you can get elite guys who I think just get undervalued in the Superflex formats because everybody's afraid of, oh, I don't want to fall out of the quarterback conversation altogether.
Well, let's go back to a week ago, right here on this channel, right about now. We were putting the ends to a underdog Superflex puppy draft where we took Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson as our first 2 picks. And then we had Jordan Love and CJ Stroud. So we got through the first 5 rounds and we just had the 2 quarterbacks. We also had Kenneth Walker at pick 66, and then we had George Kittle at pick 55. So it's like really those first 5 rounds were 2 wide receivers, 2 quarterbacks, and a tight end for us before we took our first running back. And that team felt like a monster. Now, we took some sizable swings at running back later on. After pick 100, we ended up with 8 running backs compared to 6 wide receivers on that team. And our last 2 quarterbacks, we went with Tyler Shook, pick 90, and then Jalen Milroe at pick 175. So my kind of feeling with Superflex is you never want to start a run of quarterbacks if you're not in the first round. Like I would much rather be midway through the run because quarterback scoring, if you're not talking about Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, quarterback scoring is so replaceable. These guys are going to score between 16, 21 points most weeks, and you can survive that. What you can't survive is coming in up against a team with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson who go out and put up 35 points or more in a week, and your top wide receiver is, I don't know, Khalil Shakir or George Pickens, guys who could be a bit more variable, shall we say. So yeah, I definitely try to not get overzealous with the quarterback position. In 20 round formats, I'm generally looking for 4 QB builds. There's plenty of data out there that says in best ball formats, 4 QB builds, even taking a late shot can be advantageous. But my quarterback 3 is pretty much always coming after round 6. I can't have it in me to spend 3 picks on a quarterback in the first 6 rounds.
I have 2 other points on the Superflex front. I would say number 1, that this is probably where, so the Fantasy Pros, Draft Wizard, Draft Tool, Draft Assistant, with Draft Intel, getting the intel on your league, especially in Superflex, this is one of the biggest edges you can get, because the key with Superflex a lot of time is just trying to figure out when are the quarterbacks going to be drafted, because it changes all over the place. It's why there's really no true Superflex ADP. Now, when you have a format like Underdog, that's probably in its truest format. You're not going to see quarterbacks probably fall too dramatically because there is an ADP that's there. But whether playing on Sleeper, whether you're playing on ESPN, there's not enough mock drafts for there to be enough data on Superflex. So it's kind of all over the place, and it's based on how the drafters are doing in that room. And how do you find that information? With Draft Intel. So if you're in a Superflex league, you need to make sure you look at that tool, because it will help you significantly. Because if you know when the quarterback runs are going to go and when they're going to start and who takes quarterbacks and who doesn't, well, you can have your cake and eat it too. So you can draft these elite players at the skill positions without getting boxed out of quarterback, because you know when the quarterback runs are going to happen. So that's one point I wanted to make. And then the other one is, I think that there's a big difference between full PPR and half PPR when it comes to Superflex formats, because quarterbacks, especially rushing quarterbacks, where they score 6 rushing points per touchdown, like they score so many more points than all the other positions. So it's really hard to catch up to those teams where you're having a quarterback score like 30 points, seemingly every other week, and your running back, receivers, and tight ends are only scoring half PPR points. Whereas in full PPR, okay, now you can have more, there are more skill players that can actually match some of the lesser known quarterbacks. So I'm even willing to push quarterbacks farther down the board in Superflex, probably at least my second quarterback, because full PPR, these running backs that catch passes and score points as rushers and score touchdowns, like they can stack up with some of these secondary quarterbacks. So keep that in mind, that PPR versus half PPR. I think it matters a lot for Superflex. I don't think it's really talked about enough.
Love that point, which feels like a great point to send us out on. And look, if you've enjoyed this conversation, if you made it this far, I'm going to assume that you're going to smash the like button down below and make sure you subscribe to Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. But next week, we'll be back in the best ball streets. Each and every week, we'll be talking best ball until the season starts right here, twitch.tv/Fantasy Pros. Come along, draft with us, talk strategy with us, snipe us on our picks if you dare. We will still try and build a good team. Myself, Andrew, all season long. For us and producer Seth, we truly appreciate you hanging out, and we will catch you next time.
Just don't take away Rashod Bateman from us, please.